Just like everybody, and welcome to my first ever video lesson on the subject of computer science with Python for class 11. To begin with, I would like to straight away start with chapter number 2, which is the Python fundamentals. The fact of the matter is the first chapter, which is getting started with Python, is really simple and really short, and then it's very general in nature. And then I thought, why not club the first 2 chapters into one? So this is the reason, I am straight away starting with the chapter number 2. And then whatever stuff needs to be covered in the chapter 1, I'll be including those in this current chapter of Python fundamentals. So first and foremost, you need to understand what is computer language. Computer language is nothing but a language which computer needs to understand. Whenever we want to assign some tasks to the computers, we cannot afford to speak in our language. Okay, we understand Tibetan language, we understand English language, but the problem is the computer is the ultimate machine that will carry out the designated task. So which means we are left with no choice but to speak in a language the computer understands. So this is what we mean by computer language. So there are many computer languages over the years, the latest being the Python programming language. As and when the times move on, especially in the field of technology, be it hardware technology, be it software technology, the technology needs to keep evolving. Hence, the latest programming language is Python. Understandably, the reason is there are a lot of, the plus points. Yes, the Python as a programming language does have its own share of minuses, but comparatively, relatively, the Python is the best till date. So that's the definition of computer language. So in class 11 and class 12, we have the subject of computer science, which primarily revolves around the programming language of the Python. And yes, we do have some of the theoretical chapters, the databases, but whatever said and done, the Python as a programming language forms the crux of the matter in the subject of computer science in class 11 and class 12. Okay, so now the next up is, now as of today, since this is the first session, I just would like to highlight some of the terms or the terminologies which are super important in times to come. So I'll be dealing with the basics. I'll be highlighting the meanings or the definition of the terms that we will be using in the coming 2 years of your class 2 academic session. So the first important term that you need to know is high level language. Okay, so this is the term number 1. We need to understand what is it, that this particular term means, high-level language. Python is not just high-level language. In fact, it's a very, very high-level language. The meaning of high-level language means, now we as a human, say, sit, here, and then you have the machine somewhere down there, and then you have this gap between us and the machine. Okay, so the language that we need to know in order to assign the work to the computers could be at various levels. You have the machine down there or the computers, and then we are up here. So it's us who has to assign work to the computer, but we need to speak a language that computer understands. Alright, so the language could be closer to the machine. Perhaps you could say those languages are low level languages because they are closer to the machine. And the middle level language, it's on the halfway between the machine and the humans. And then high level language means the languages which are closer to us. Now when I say closer to us, closer in terms of what? Closer in terms of understanding. So we understand English language. It's a universal language. Somehow, if we could interpret the computer language closer to the English language, we actually call it as high level language, because we are so much familiar with the English language. And then if we could, bring up the computer language closer and closer to the English language, which we are totally familiar with, we call it as high level language. In earlier times, we used to have languages like assembly language, which has full of codes, digits, numerics, and then it's little far away from the English language-like statements. Hence, we call it as low-level languages, or perhaps middle-level languages. Last year, we had this language of C++. Okay, so perhaps C++ as a language is little lower than the Python programming language. So when I say high, middle, low, generally it means that it's on the higher side, because for us it's easier to understand. So if the computer language is designed in such a way that it's closer to the structure or the designs of English language, we refer to as the high level language or very high level language. So the computer languages which resembles the grammatical rules or the sentence structure of English language, we refer to those as high level language. So Python is a very high level language. It means it has a very close resemblance with the English language statements. Hence, it's easier for us, easier for the programmers in order to deal with the computer language. So this is the meaning of high level language. Now the next up is, you may wonder, this word Python, it's a little scary the moment you hear it. The moment you hear it, we tend to imagine that scary reptile, right? But it's nothing to do with that scary animal as such. In fact, if you go through the history of the Python programming language, the name is derived from the BBC comedy show called the Monty Python's Flying Circus. If you know this much, that's more than enough. So you need to know this Python as a name of the programming language has nothing to do with the reptile, even though you will see a small cute picture of the python, okay, the reptile python. So if you know this much, that's more than enough, right? And then now the next up is in order to carry out the tasks using the Python programming language, we need to have the platform, or we need to have the environment in the computer. Ultimately, it's us, you and I, who needs to come up with a program or a software using the programming language of Python. But there should be a platform or the environment in which we are going to design a program using Python programming language, or for that matter, any other programming languages. So that very environment or that very platform is called as the IDE. So this is yet another important term, IDLE, or you can just call it as IDE. So this stands for Integrated Development Environment. Okay, Integrated Development Environment. So which means, so these are the environment. It's just like, if you want to get schooling, if you want to get educated, you need to be in an environment like the school, the colleges, or the universities in which you have the faculty members, the classrooms, and the required the attributes. So likewise, IDE means it's the platform or the environment in the computer in which we will have the necessary tools, the necessary the characteristics, the necessary requirements for us to build a program or design a program. So this is called IDLE or IDE. Python has a default Python distribution which you could download from www.python.org. So you can actually use the default Python distribution or from the website, the official website of python.org. Since this is the first session, we'll not get into the Python, the software as such. Okay, we'll just try to understand the basics. And then there are not many Python distributions, like you have the Anaconda. Okay, oops, there you go. I wasn't trying to scare you, but I have no choice but to come up with yet another scary animal. But this is again another Python distribution in which you will find many other packages or libraries, which are again to do with the Python. So you can have IDE, in the Anaconda distribution. Now this is for your knowledge. Ultimately, you'll be zeroing down to just one IDE. Okay, so you don't have to know so many IDEs as such. It's important that you know how to implement the program, and then you run it in any of the IDEs. It's just the same. But since you are in the beginning stage, I recommend if you could use the default Python IDE called CPython. So the default is the CPython installation. All right. So this is pretty easy. It's just a matter of few clicks, okay, and few touches, before the Python will be installed onto your computer or on your machine. Okay. So this two terms are really important. Moving on. Now let's say we'll try to focus on the next important term. The next important term could be the token. Okay, so what is meant by token? The token is nothing but the smallest individual unit of a program. Now, since we have not seen the program as such, since we have not dealt with any programs with Python, it's a little difficult for you to get the entire picture. Okay, this is the reason why I had to skip some of the topics like the pluses, the advantages of Python over the traditional programming languages. What are the demerits of the Python programming languages? Because if I just go on with those, it's a little hard to make sense because you have not seen the program as such. Okay, so I'm just trying to touch upon those terms, which will make a lot of sense without having come across any program of Python as such. Okay, but having said this, you will come across some holes, but just try to hang on. So the token is nothing but, let's say I have a program. Just imagine there is a program which adds two numbers. So this program will have various parts and various blocks. So the token means the smallest individual unit of a program which cannot be broken further. For example, say if I have a mathematical expression of a plus b, and this is an expression, but this expression could be broken further down into the operator, and then you have the operand. The operation, the whole process is called operation. The operator are the signs or the symbols which trigger the calculation or the computation, and then the variables, of A and B are called operands. So A and B are called operands. Okay, this is A, operands, and then this is called the operator. And then the entire process is called operation. Alright? So, this as a whole is an example of expression, but this could be still broken further. So you cannot call A plus B as the token, because it could be broken further into operands or operator. So take an example of this operator, plus sign. This plus sign cannot be broken any further. So this could be an example of a token. Likewise, A and B could be an example of token. So just like cell is the basic unit of life which we have learned in science, even though the cells could be broken down further, but in your junior classes we seem to be understanding things as cell is the basic unit of life. So likewise, the token is the part of the program which cannot be divided or broken further. So there are few types of token. The first one is called keyword. Like I said, it's a little difficult to make whole sense, but it's important that you need to know the basics first. Keywords are those words in a program which convey a special meaning to the Python interpreter or the language processor. So again, I'll have to talk a little bit on the language processor. Just write it here. Language processor. I'll not tell you the entire story. Okay, now what is this language processor? Now this is nothing but a software. It's a system software which converts the high-level language program into machine language program. Let's say we come up with the calculator software or a gaming software using the Python programming language. Alright, so I code the program, I code the software, and then once it's done, it now needs to be converted to a machine language, which means it needs to be converted to a language which computer will now execute, or the computer will actually carry out the operation. Okay, so I write the software using high-level language of Python. Okay, so with the help of language processor, this will now be converted to a machine language, and it's then the machine which will carry out the actual operation of the software. Okay, so this is nothing but a system software which converts high-level language program that we write into a machine language, which machine will carry out the actual operation. So the language processor is, it's a key thing whenever the high-level language needs to be converted to machine language. Okay, so you can have two kinds of language processor. The first one is interpreter. Okay, hope I got the spelling right. And then you have the compiler. Right. So you have two kinds of language processor. The first one is interpreter, and the second one is compiler. So interpreter is a kind of language processor which converts the high-level language program into machine language and then executes it one statement by one. Okay, now let's say you have a program with 5 statements. Okay, there are two steps involved. So this is statement number 1, 2, 3, 4. Just try to get the basic idea, that's more than enough. So this is a simple software and then written in the Python programming language. So it needs to be converted first and then finally it has to be executed by the machine. I repeat, the program has to be converted by the language processor into machine language, and then the machine has to execute, the machine converted program, to start the actual operation of the computer. So there are two steps involved. The first one is the conversion, and then you have the execution. So interpreter, Python is an interpreted computer language, which means, it uses the interpreter mode of converting the high-level language program. So what happens in interpreter mechanism is, the first line will be converted, and then it will be executed. And then it picks up the second statement, it's converted, and then executed. Alright? So based on line by line, the conversion and the execution move along. However, in compiler, what happens is the entire program is converted in one go, and then the execution starts. So basically, the difference between these two is in interpreter, the program is converted and executed line by line. But in compiler, the entire program is converted first, and then at one go, the entire program will be executed. So this is the difference between the two. I know it's a little hard to, make whole sense, but just try to get the basics, right? So all in all, language processor converts high-level language program into machine language. I hope you're clear with this. So coming back to the keyword, there are certain terms or certain words in the program which we cannot use it for the user-defined operation. Say, I would like to use a variable. I would like to use a variable. I would like to use a name. But I cannot use certain words as the user-defined variable names. If I want to come up with a variable or a label, right, I can use, but the ones that I use cannot belong to certain group of the reserved words, because they are already reserved. They convey already a special meaning to the language processor, be it interpreter or compiler. Okay? For example, say I want to start my organization. Sometimes analogy is a wonderful idea. Say I want to start my company. I want to, publish my own website. But can I, name my website as google.com? I cannot do it because it's already reserved, by the Internet Association, right? The domain name has been booked or reserved already. So likewise, there are certain keywords or certain words or terminologies which are already defined by language processor for a special meaning. So I cannot use any one of those. So these words are nothing but keyword. Again, if I give you an example of keyword, there are many, but just for understanding's sake, I have this if I cannot have a variable name with if, because this has a special meaning to the language processor. So likewise, there are plenty more. In times to come, you will understand better. As of now, just remember that keywords are reserved words which convey a special meaning to the language processor. It's so important that you be completely thorough with the understanding of these terms. And then the next up is identifier. Alright, identifier. Identifier, as the name suggests, it's a terminology which helps us to identify certain part of the program. Say, I want to go to a school clinic, but unless and until the school has a concrete definition or a label of this being the school clinic, if there is no means to identify that building as a clinic, it's very difficult, right? So likewise, in a program, you need to refer you need to identify certain parts or certain blocks or certain section of the programs, okay, for which you'll have to use the identifier. For example, I want to store the name of a student. I want to store the name of a student. So if I want to do so, I need to have a label. So perhaps, you know, the label could be NAME. So this is an example of an identifier through which I'll be able to store a value, or I'll be able to store a name of a student in this. Say the name of the student is Denzel, right? Denzel. So this as a value is stored in the computer memory, right? I need to refer. I need to have a way out to identify that Denzel is stored in that particular memory location. So it's through the identifier of name that I'll be able to gain access to Denzel. So this is a value, and in order to identify this particular value, I need to have the identifier. Okay, so there are many examples of identifier. Again, I'll not go deep into those because you have the whole the curriculum, you know, on the variables, and then you have the functions, you have the classes and the objects. So as of now, the simplest example of identifier is variable. So this name is an example of variable. So it's through, why do we call name as variable is, you know, or why do we call variable as identifier is? It is through this variable that I'm able to identify the value of Denzel. Okay, so the second keyword or second important term is identifier. All right, so this is more to do with the words which already have a special meaning to the language processor. But identifier are those terms which will be used by us in a program to identify certain values or certain parts of the program. I cannot tell you the entire story about identifier. As and when we deal with more and more chapters, the pictures will start to look brighter and clearer, right? And then you have the third one is you have the literal. Okay? So all these are nothing but the tokens. Literal means the constant or the values which will not change. Okay, you know the meaning of constant. The data items, you know, which have their values fixed. Data items whose values do not change is actually called as literal, or you can use the word called constant, right? So again, in programming language like Python or the traditional programming languages like C++, C, you know, all of them have literal or constant. So literal or constant means it's a data items, you know, whose value will not change. It's simple. For example, you know, again, there are many literals. Example, the first one could be, okay, if I just write it here, I hope you're able to see. Say the example could be string literal, okay, and then you have the numerics, all right, and then you have the Boolean, and then you have a special literal, you know, called none. Okay, this is a special literal called none, right? So in the Python programming language, you know, you can have 4 literal or 4 data items, you know, with a fixed value. The first one is the string. String means it's a sequence of characters which are enclosed in a pair of quotes. Like I said, you know, string is nothing but it's a value. It's again literal or constant. So this string means, I hope you are able to see this part. String means it's, say, just write here string. So let's say I have this sequence of characters called Tibet. If I enclose this in pair of single quote or double quote, this value or this constant value or this literal is called string values. Okay, so in a Python programming language, if you want to deal with a word, the sentences, the paragraphs, the documents, the kind of the value will be a string. All right, and then at times you can have the non-graphical characters. So again, this is important. Let's say I have a term called non-graphical characters. Okay. So what is meant by non-graphical characters? These characters are the characters which cannot be typed from the keyboard. Say if you want to type letter A, what happens the moment you hit the key of character A, you get to see it visually up on the screen. Same is the case with numbers, the symbols, the special characters. But there are certain keys which when pressed are not typed on to the screen. Say if you press a space bar, do you see it up on the screen? You don't see it. Say when you press enter, the backspace, the tab, these are called non-graphical characters because you cannot just see the graphical view of these characters up on the screen, or in other words, you cannot type these characters like the space bar, the tab, the backspace. When I say you cannot type, of course you can type, but it's not visible up on the screen. But in fact, what you see up on the screen is their actions or effects. All right. So in order to represent, let's say I would like to have string values or a string literal called free Tibet, but in between free and Tibet, I would like to keep a tab space. Tab is half an inch, right? So if you want to keep a space of a tab between free and Tibet, the problem is, you cannot type it directly, from the keyboard. So what you do is, okay, you write free here, and then backslash, and then write T, and then you have Tibet. So the point that I'm trying to make is you can have such sequence as a part of the string value. So I'll just keep it simple. So this means in between free and Tibet, you will have a space of a tab key, a tab character. When you press tab key, what happens? The cursor jumps by half an inch, right? So if you want to leave a tab gap in between free and Tibet, you can have such kind of sequence. So this kind of sequence is actually called as escape sequence. Since this is the first ever programming class, you may find it a little difficult, but don't worry. As and when we move on, things will sound a lot better. So why do we call it as escape sequence? Is in order to solve the problem of getting to see the effect of non-graphical characters, we have the escape sequence. So to keep it simple, non-graphical characters means characters which cannot be typed directly onto the monitor. But if you want to see the effect of non-graphical characters up on the screen in the program, we need to take the help of escape sequence. It provides a way out in order to solve the problems of non-graphical keys not being able to be up on the screen. Okay, so all in all, string values or string literal means any number of characters, okay, sequence of characters which are either enclosed in single pair of pair of single quote or pair of double quotes. You can in fact use pair of the triple single quotes or triple double quotes also. But in order to make the picture much better, I'll be in the next class. I'll be taking the class live on the screen itself. All right. So this is the meaning of the string. And then the next up is you have the numerics. All right. Okay. So in numerics, again, there are three important types. The first one is the integer, and the second one is the float, and then you have the complex numbers. Okay, so again, under the numeric literal or numeric constant, you have three more parts. The first one is integer, float, and then you have the complex. Integer understandably means either the positive or the negative whole numbers. Okay, simple and straight. So integer means you're referring to the whole numbers either in positive or in negative. Float means, now this is relatively a new word. Float means the real numbers, which are represented with decimal point, which separates the integer part and then the fractional part. Okay, so float means you're referring to the real numbers which are represented with a decimal point separating the numbers on the left and numbers on the right, which are called the fractional values. So basically float is being represented to numbers with decimal points. Simple. And then the complex numbers are in the form of a plus bj. In mathematics, we use I, but in computer programming language, we use J. So A and B, you have learned in class 10 already, but just as a matter of quick recall, A and B are real numbers. However, the value of J is equal to square root of minus 1. You don't have a value for square root of minus 1. Hence, this number is treated as imaginary numbers. So all in all, again, this is a numeric representation which we will have to use in processing certain mathematical calculation. Hence, complex number is very important. So like I said again, A and B are real numbers. J is square root of minus 1. We don't have any value for square root of minus 1. Hence, it is considered as imaginary number. So when you look at the complex number as a whole, this is the real part of the complex number. A is the real part of the complex number, and bj is the imaginary part of the number. So in programming language, we have three important literal or constant. The first one is the integer, which is the whole number either in positive, negative. Float means the fractional values, and then complex means a plus b and j. And then up next is you have the Boolean. I'm sure you must have learned Boolean Algebra. Basically, there was this mathematician called George Boole. He came up with a wonderful idea of solving big, complicated, the problems in terms of just two values, either true or false. Okay, I'll not go deep into all that. It's more to do with mathematical basics. So this is how you got this name. Boolean values means there are just two values. Say, for example, do you want to say what is the capital city of, say, Tibet? Your answer should be either this or that. You cannot have middle values in between. So many of the decisions in computer program could be evaluated in terms of just two values, either this or that. So in order to take care of such situation, we do have to use the Boolean values. There are two possible Boolean values. The first one is true please mind it. This, T is big T, and then rest are lowercase, and then the next Boolean value is false. Alright? So true is the Boolean value, and then false is another Boolean values. So you have two possible values, true and false. And then finally you have the none. None is a special literal or a special constant which is used to indicate the absence of a value. If a value is missing, if there is no value as such, let's say one of the new class 11 student joining certain classes doesn't have a phone number or doesn't have a certain specific data, okay, but I need to know that that student doesn't have a phone number. So the question is, how do I check? How do I know? How do I carry out in terms of the program to check whether the value of that particular student is missing? So we assign a special value called none, N-O-N-E, via which we'll be able to figure out that it's this particular value that is missing. So in order to just indicate that that particular value is missing, we use the special literal or special constant called none. Alright? So as of now, like I said earlier, I've been saying this, it's not possible to grasp the entire meaning. Just try to get the bits and pieces, the surface aspect of these terms, and then as and when we move on, you will feel a lot better. Okay, and then now so these are the tokens, right? And then now the next up is you have the operator. Okay, operator is again a token which triggers a calculation or the computation when applied to variables or the operands. I've given you an example of this. This as a whole is the operation, but you see this plus sign is an operator. So this operator is a token. It's the smallest individual unit of a program which cannot be explained further or broken further. So this is the atomic unit. So this plus sign is a token which triggers a calculation or a computation. As in this particular example, it adds up the values of A and B. So, but in computer programming language there are many operators. But I'll just briefly tell you as of now, two kinds of operator. The first one is unary operator, and the second one is binary operator. Okay, unary operator means just one. So these kinds of operators need just one operand to act upon. Okay, unary operator means it just needs one operand to operate it upon. Let's say you have this unary minus. This is the example of unary operator. Let's say you have the value of A. Hope you're able to see this. Let's say you have the value of A as 3. Alright? So if I use the unary operator on minus A, so if I apply the unary minus on A, the value of A will change to negative 3. Alright? However, let's say the value of A is minus 3 or negative 3. And then if I use the negative operator, unary minus on A, what happens? The value of A, which is negative 3, will change to positive 3. So as you can see clearly, this is an operator, and I call this as unary operator. Why unary operator? Because it needs just one operand. Look at this. It just needs one operand. Operand means the values or the object on which the operation takes place. in the hospital, the doctor is like the operator, the patient is the operand, the entire process is the operation. So these are like patients. So if you apply unary minus, the value of a, which was -3, will now change to +3. And then likewise you have some more unary operators like not logical negation, which I'll cover later, but as of now just get the rough sketch or rough idea. Binary means it needs two operands. You have plus, okay, you have minus again, this could be binary operator also. So a plus b, a minus b, it needs two operands. And then you have the asterisk for multiplication. So again, it needs two operands. Have you ever come across a situation using multiplication operator or just one operand? Impossible. It needs two operands. Hence, we call this as binary operator. And then you have the float division operator. This is float division operator, which means 5 divided by 2, you will get the answer as 2.5. Okay? However, you have another operand called floor. This is float. Okay? It will give us the answer of 2.5. Alright? So this is a float value. When you divide 5 by 2, you will get the answer in float or the fractional values or in the real numbers format. Hence, we call it as float division operator. This is called floor division operator. Floor division operator. Floor means the lower side. Ceiling means on the higher side. Okay? So, say if I use something like this. If I have an expression like this, 5 floor division operator 2, the answer has to be just 2. If you apply this, you get the answer as 2.5. Is it? The ceiling could be 3, the floor could be 2. Okay? Ceiling is on the high side, floor is on the lower side. The reason why we call this as floor division operator is this will give us the lower value. Lower integer value of 2.5. So 5 floor division operator 2, you will get the answer as just 2. However, if you use a single forward slash, we do get the normal answer of 2.5. So this will get rid of the fractional values. It will just give us the integer part. Okay, so this is the difference between the two, but don't worry, we'll come across the next chapter which focuses on the working of these operators. In short, binary operators are those operators which need two operands. All these operators deal with operands, the two operands. And then there could be some more there could be some more operators. In fact, there are 3. Could be you have these are arithmetic operators, okay, and then you have the relational operators like is equal to, greater or equal to, less than or equal to. These operators establish the relationship between the two sides. Okay, is this equal to this, or is it greater, is it less, is it not equal to? So these are called relational operator. And then you have the logical operator. Logical operator, you can have the and, you have the or, you have the not. Okay, so these are again logical operators. The relational operators could be joined together using the logical operator. For example, say you need to qualify for an entrance examination. Okay, you need to qualify for entrance examination, and the condition is your percentage should be greater or equal to 75. Your percentage should be greater or equal to 75 means this operator which is being used now is relational operator. However, there is one more condition. Your age needs to be higher than 17. Just giving you an example. You have two conditions now. Your percentage should be higher than 75. That's the condition number 1. And the next condition is your age needs to be more than 17. You have two conditions which must be fulfilled in order to be qualified for the entrance examination. Now this time I need to combine these two relational expressions with the help of a logical operator called AND. So in between the expression for the percentage and your age, I need to have this combined with the help of logical operator. Just giving you a brief idea, that's more than enough, right? And then you can have, some more operators like the assignment operators. Okay, so since we have not seen a program just as yet, I don't think it'll make much of sense if I just continue with the rest of the operators. So all in all, I want you to get this. These are nothing but the operators. And then finally, you'll have the punctuators. Punctuators means you have the square bracket, you have the common bracket, you have the braces, you have the colon, you have the comma, and then whatnot, possibly, all the punctuators. Now these punctuators are used to organize the sentence structures of your program. Okay, I need to be very careful with the structure of the program. So for which I'll have to take the help of the punctuators. Alright? And then it's not just all about, maintaining the organization of the program, but at times, I need to indicate the rhythm, all right, or the emphasis of, the expression. Okay, so punctuators, they, do two important things. The first one is they organize the sentence structure. That's number 1. And then in order to indicate the rhythm, right, or the emphasis of certain expression, we again take the help of punctuators. Okay, just get the rough idea, that's more than enough, right? So all in all, if I just organize the entire thing, token is the smallest individual unit of the program. There are 5 important parts. The first one is the keyword. Second keyword, the reserved words which have a special meaning to the language processor, which means we cannot use those keywords, for our own user-defined variables. Identifiers means the name or the variables, which are used to identify the various parts of the program. Okay, and then you have the literal, constant, the values or the constant or the literals or the data items, which will have a fixed value. And then you have the operator which triggers the calculation or the computation, and the punctuators which are used to organize the sentence structure of the program. And then it is also used to indicate the rhythm or the emphasis of the expressions. Okay? Again, I don't feel so too comfortable with this because we have not seen a program just as yet, right? So now moving on,